Hello everyone, this is Mix Awesome Manatee. Indiana Jones, a movie that debuted in 1981. Why, 40 years later, are we still talking about this character as if they just came out? The first question to ask is, why Indiana Jones? What compelled George Lucas and Steven Spielberg to create this character? Now, what happens in the first film? In Raiders of the Lost Ark, it takes place in 1936 where Goose Stepper's Notorious tries to steal a Jewish artifact and use it for their own gain. Indiana Jones, an American, steps in to stop them from desecrating the Ark. So does it work because people hate Nazis? In Temple of Doom, it takes place in 1935, where a cult enslaves children and steals magic rocks to empower themselves at the expense of their surrounding villages. Yet, people still uphold this film as among the greats. In Last Crusade, we return back to Nazis, and this time they're after the Holy Grail. Add in Indiana Jones' backstory and incorporate his father into much of their adventures. Unlike the prior films, it explores the makeup of Indiana Jones from small things such as how he got his name to where he developed a fascination with archaeology. Many complain about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, a movie that attempts to continue the legacy by introducing a son and reintroducing one of Jones's love interests. A movie that was very reminiscent of those who directed it, emphasizing the value of family while still making room for an adventure. Not the best entry, but it gained a cult following, and honestly I don't think it's as bad as people say. It was a movie about the 1950s where the Soviet Union attempted to steal the Crystal Skull so that Irina Spalko can use it to know everything. Dial of Destiny came across another problem: the culture warriors who complain about every time a character with a vagina is introduced. Dial of Destiny attempts to close in on something that Indiana Jones hadn't done before, contend with his twilight years while still paying homage to his golden years, and reintroducing the radical concept of the Nazis being the bad guys. I know, it's a lot to take in. This one was not directed by either Spielberg or Lucas, but rather by James Mangold. But what makes Indiana Jones such an attraction? And I don't mean the theme park rides and shows. What gives such a lasting appeal into the 21st century? Why do people still want to watch this? Aren't the 30s a bygone era? Isn't archaeology questionable at times?
How do you think your ancestors got these? You think they paid a fair price?
That belongs in a museum!
What appeals anyone to this character? You could list several reasons, from how badass he is, how suave he is in the midst of danger, but that's not the selling point. There were already movies in this time that portrayed such characters that stayed stoic in the face of danger, heroes that competently fought against bad guys and saved the day. Indiana Jones was nowhere close to that. He did fight bad guys, but he did not always have the upper hand. Some were smarter than him, some were stronger than him, and a lot of times outnumbered him. Some even got the best of him. Yet, what made everyone root for him in the end? People don't watch Indiana Jones to watch him fail, do they? Well, yes and no. Spielberg, Lucas, and Lawrence Kasdan knew that every action needs an ebb and flow. The first treasure Indiana Jones got, he was good enough to pry the treasure from the dangerous traps of the tomb, but not smart enough to not get it stolen from him by Belloc. He was smart enough to steal from the Chinese mob, but not wary enough to notice that the mob owned the plane that he was escaping on. He was clever enough to steal the Cross of Coronado, but not clever enough to realize that they would just track him to his house. All of these are consistent with one line of Indiana Jones.
Oh, I don't know. I'm making this up as I go.
And this alone makes him more relatable than a character like John Rambo. The mystique of such characters is that they're larger than life and embody a paragon of some values. Indy isn't that. He's a human being that adapts to what's given to him. He has a goal, and though his ambition is steep, his determination outweighs that. All the odds are stacked against him, but whenever he does succeed, that just makes it so much more satisfying. But then, why do the artifacts always rescue themselves? He doesn't necessarily fight for the protection of the artifacts themselves. And while museums remain a point of contention for people on the receiving end of imperialism, Indiana Jones is not that kind of character. He's an idealistic and misguided layman that fights so that others could appreciate the artifacts in history. After all, in Temple of Doom, when he was arguably at his worst, what did he do with the stones when he got a hold of them? Did he take them to a British museum? Or did he return it to the village that begged for his help? What were the Nazis infamous for during this time? When the Nazis inquired J.R.R. Tolkien about his lineage, he had this to say: "Thank you for your letter. I regret that I am not clear as to what you intend by Irish. I am not of Aryan extraction, that is Indo-Iranian. As far as I am aware, none of my ancestors spoke Hindustani, Persian, Romani, or any related dialects. But if I am to understand that you are inquiring whether I am of Jewish origin, I can only reply that I regret that I appear to have no ancestors of that gifted people. My great-great-grandfather came to England in the 18th century from Germany. The main part of my descent is therefore purely English. I am an English subject, which should be sufficient. I've been accustomed nonetheless to regard my German name with pride, and continue to do so throughout the period of the late regrettable war, in which I served in the English army. I cannot, however, forbear to comment that if impertinent and irrelevant inquiries of this sort are to become the rule in matter of literature, then the time is not far distant when a German name will no longer be a source of pride. Your inquiry is doubtless made in order to comply with the laws of your own country, and that this should be held to apply to the subjects of another state would be improper, even if it had, as it had not, any bearing whatsoever on the merits of my work or its sustainability or for publication, of which you appear to have satisfied yourselves without reference to my Abstammung." This was in response to Germany wanting to prioritize Aryan literature above Jewish literature. Even with Tolkien's response, Aryan is a reference to Indian, Persian, or Romani descent, the very people the Nazis show contempt for. In other words, like the swastika, the Nazis bastardized every bit of other people's culture to perpetuate their regime. It was fitting that within Raiders, the Nazis attempted to seize Jewish artifacts to perpetuate an invincible army, only to receive the wrath of God at the end. The Ark didn't need Indiana Jones's protection. God was fine without the intervention of man. He could protect himself. However, that wasn't the reason Jones went after the Ark. It was so that the Nazis couldn't appropriate it as part of their regime. Like Belloc, who didn't regard the Havitos with any sort of respect, nor the Ark. It was never about sanctifying the cultures he studied, but gaining glory through discovery. Helping a regime like the Nazis showed that Belloc had no regard for academic integrity. Meanwhile, throughout the remainder of the films, Indiana Jones wasn't fanatically loyal to any faction. Hell, his own country even accused him of collaboration with the Russians without regarding his service prior. At the end of Raiders, Jones recovered the Ark from the Nazis so that they couldn't get a hold of it. In Temple of Doom, he recovered the stones and returned them back to the village that asked for his help. Jones didn't recover the Holy Grail, his father saving him instead. Jones didn't recover the Crystal Skull, he and his group returned it to their original owners. Jones returned the Dial of Destiny back to the very inventor of it, Archimedes. If anything, Jones might actually be as good an archaeologist as James Bond is a spy, doing the complete opposite of whatever their job title is supposed to do. Say what you will about the later films, but there's an Indiana Jones for each generation. The newer films will never replace what came before, but they're not meant to. But why does Indiana Jones work? Much like Spielberg when he first filmed it, he might not have everything figured out, but his intention guided his actions. He learned from his mistakes, and in the end, people can see it. This is the ultimate fantasy that many viewers can relate to. Sometimes you're down in the dirt, and it feels like no matter what you do, it just won't work. And some people might argue it's just sheer dumb luck that saves him, or it's the connections he makes. It's the friends and family you make along the way. Sure, call it luck, but give credit where it's due. I think we would all like to think that our efforts pay off and that our friends will have our backs at the end of the day, no matter what gets in your way. Some people watch older stuff because they want to see a badass. I think what makes up Indiana Jones more than the whip, the jacket, and the fedora, there's more to it than that. I think Manigault made a good decision to incorporate Sala, Marion, and some new characters. He understood the assignment. The movie ain't perfect. I'll definitely go for the classics over postmodern, but I can at least appreciate that this was made by a fan for the fans. I think Indiana Jones is probably one of the most relatable characters. We always hold ourselves to an unrealistic standard. While paragons do have their place, it's nice to have somebody you can just relate to. I might be drowning now, but it's okay. Everybody struggles. You just gotta keep swimming and then... But yeah, I think that's why Indiana Jones works. Let me know if you want a further breakdown of other iterations of this kind of character through Uncharted or Tomb Raider. Thank you for watching though.